Hey guys, it's Bongo5 for League Top 10, and today we're talking about Maokai. Now Maokai is the new 6300 tank hybrid champion by Riot, and generally speaking a tank hybrid champion is one who can be like an off tank or sometimes a main tank while still offering a lot of burst damage due to their AP related skills, because usually hybrids are related to AP, not exactly physical damage. Most other tanks are physical related. Good examples of these hybrids would be like Nunu or Galio, not including Maokai. Now, Maokai has some very interesting abilities, which both fill the tank role as well as potentially the magic damage role. But if you look at other tanks that may be classified as a hybrid, they really can fulfill that magic role well if they choose so, and oftentimes they can even do it without going full magic, and they can actually do a lot of damage without sacrificing a ton of survivability. What I feel with Maokai is that he can fulfill both roles decently early on, but as the game goes on, he starts to pose less and less threat or significance for the matter of any role he chooses to go. If he chooses AP, tanky AP rather, or if he chooses tank. A large part of this can be attributed to a few of his skills being, or rather having a low base damage, even at max rank. But on top of this, having really low AP ratios as well. But don't get me wrong, Maokai is a fun champion to play, and I really feel Riot did a good job designing him. It's just like, for the most part, like Renekton a few patches ago. I feel as if his numbers like Renekton weren't where they're supposed to be. He doesn't actually have those good ratios. But before we actually talk about everything that's wrong with Maokai, let's go ahead and talk about what's right about him, what he seems to fulfill overall the best. So early game, he has one of the best harassment tools out of any champion except for like Zilean. His E, which is sapling toss, allows him to place like a mini ward essentially in a specific location, and it deals initial impact damage. So if you land it on someone, it'll deal damage to them, and then after a second or so, it chooses a target and runs towards it to explode and deal additional AoE damage. So if you actually rush this to rank 3 as fast as you can, you deal fairly significant damage to squishies, base, not including any AP additional. And you have an ability which allows you to ward a specific location for 25 seconds, but with the cooldown being as low as it is, it's essentially indefinite, because you can, if you want to, just ward a place over and over and over. So if you're in like a bot or top lane and you want to watch out for ganks, you can just toss it in the brush by the river and just keep tossing in that brush to make sure nobody's actually coming up. One thing to note though is that you would have to get some kind of mana regen in your runes or in your items to kind of compensate if you want to use it every time it's up. If you're building him primarily tank though, I really suggest that you only get one rank of it early on for the ward, and instead of put your points towards Q and W, because these skills are more geared towards the tank role than the E skill of sapling toss. Now this brings me to his Q and W spells. His Q does a small AoE knockback around him like in a circular fashion, and then slows a target in a line in front of you. So it's a circle and then a line extending from that. It's kind of like Rammus's Powerball. So when Rammus hits somebody with his Powerball, it knocks the targets around him back, and then it pushes and slows that target that he hit. And it's essentially that same ability or way to actually use it, except it's more directional. You can actually choose the direction of the slow, whereas Rammus just kind of hits something and that's the slow. Out of all his spells, it has the lowest mana cost, and it's a fairly low cooldown without any cooldown items really, which makes it pretty good to use at high ranks to even help you clear waves of minions along with your auto attacks if you have the mana for it. His W is a stun, and it's in my opinion one of the best tank stuns rather outside of ultimates. The reason I say tank stuns is because of how the stun works. It has a fairly long range, and instead of stunning the target from afar, like say Scion's works or Tarek's works, it actually teleports Maokai to the target and stuns him there. This isn't like Amumu's bandage toss, though it is similar since both of them kind of go from afar and move the target close to the target you're stunning. However, Amumu's is a skill shot, meaning it's harder to hit, because unlike Maokai's, which is just like a click on a spell and a click on the person, Amumu's, you actually, if there's a target that actually moves in front of the target you're trying to stun, you'll stun that target as well. So this one just kind of circumvents all those people and goes directly to that target, meaning that you can get up in the face of the squishies really quickly. So in a team fight, if there's a tank on the enemy team blocking your path to the squishy, you can just go right underneath him essentially and get right to the person you're wanting. On top of this, it also synergizes really well with his Q, since once you get there and stun him, as soon as he comes out of that stun, you can then apply your Q to him, which will knock him back or towards your allies if you do it right, and slow him. So he has a lot of harassment potential in team fights and the ability to really apply a lot of early pressure to that particular person you're actually fighting against. Now, when it comes time to talk about his ultimate, which like many tanks and hybrids, it's an AoE, there are some things to actually point out about it. His ultimate is more akin to Anivia's ultimate rather than Galio's ultimate or Nunu's ultimate or even Amumu's ultimate, in that where you choose the location and place it, it's continuous in that location until you turn it off, just like Anivia's. So Maokai's ultimate provides a flat 20% reduction in damage. That's flat. That's not affected by magic, resist, or anything like that. It's just flat 20% reduction in damage to all the teammates inside it for as long as he has it on. This makes it really great against heavy AoE teams because you can kind of soak that damage up for them. And it can then be dealt back to the enemies in that AoE as long as he actually turns it off after all the AoE goes up, because it essentially reflects it back to that person when you turn it off. However, the enemies do have to be inside of it, which makes it similar to Galio's ulti, except that Galio has a way to actually keep them inside, which he doesn't. This is where it suffers some serious flaws. Most AoE ultimates, especially tank ones, have some sort of stun or slow or bind to accompany them. Amumu's has a bind, Galio's has a continuous taunt, and then you have Nunu's, which is a slow. Maokai's does not, which means that once you lay it down, all the enemy has to do is run out of it or even ghost out of it and simply reset the fight or go around it, making your ultimate use and the mana cost a waste. This happens a lot more than you would think, honestly. Now, there would be some people that argue that due to the ultimate's relatively low cooldown, 30 seconds or so at mid-rank and then 20 seconds at max rank, it is an advantage since you basically force them to either back off or move. But you have to realize that if they reposition, then you and your team are forced to reposition to get them. And ultimately, you won't benefit from the damage reduction as a whole or the damage when you turn it off since they stop attacking you. Two other things that gimp his ultimate is that for a tank, there's relatively no benefit from taking more than one rank of his ultimate, besides the cooldown, which you can achieve a relatively low cooldown just with cooldown items. Since only one rank provides all the damage reduction you would need for the team fights at lower mana costs. Yes, the mana cost is almost triple at max rank. If you're going tank, you're not going to go super mana, and so you're going to actually just take rank 1 to conserve mana if possible, so you can use your other harassment tools. On top of this, the effective damage of his ultimate at max rank is only like 200, and it doesn't even reach his cap of extra damage absorbed. So let's say you do the initial 200 burst. Well, if everybody doesn't attack you, or if everybody doesn't attack people inside that circle, it only does 500 damage at max if you get people to attack and do damage inside. And that's before magic resist and without AP. To give you a flip side advantage, for example, Nunu has about 800 damage on his ultimate if it goes off after the full duration. That's without AP or any kind of resist or AP ratio added to it or anything like that, just 800 flat. And 500 really at max rank, when you think about it, people have effective 2600 HP. For an ultimate, 500, if you get people to use their ultimates inside of it, isn't a lot. But because there's obviously no slow component to that, people just disengage, like I said, before you can get the cap. Now, if League of Legends has taught us anything as players, it's that standing in big red circles for prolonged amounts of time is bad. You know, there's a lot of AoE circles you don't want to stand in. So people just move out of it, and you're left there keeping it on for what reason? Last, specific to the ultimate, there's not a visual marker when you hit the extra damage cap, meaning that you can't really judge if you actually have hit that cap where you can do the max 500 damage without AP. So you don't really know if you should keep it on for the damage reduction if people are still inside of it, or if you blow it up to do damage to the people inside of that are your enemies. Something better would be, you know, if it actually had like some kind of marker on him, or he glowed whenever it actually went off like that. So now that we've pointed out his particular series of flaws with his ultimate, let's talk about the other serious flaw with Maokai, and that's his AP ratios. You'll notice that a lot of the game footage that we're looking at with me and Maokai have been early to mid game, with very little footage considered late game footage. And the reason for this is, as it currently stands, his AP ratios are really terrible, except for his stun, which is like 0.9. In fact, if you were to combine the AP ratios of his ultimate, his Q, and his E, it would only set you around 0.9 to 1. To give you a flip side, something to compare it to, Nunu's E has a 1-to-1 ratio. So in one ability, he outclasses 3 of the ability ratios for Maokai. That's 0.9. That's just terrible. Nunu also, with his ultimate, has a 2.5 AP ratio on his ultimate, which also slows. Now, it doesn't provide the damage reduction like I was speaking of, but I really feel that Maokai's ultimate should at least deserve a 1-to-1 ratio, not to mention at least his Q or E deserving something close to that, you know, like 0.8 at least or something, but not 0.3, which is essentially what it is. It's obvious that Riot wanted Maokai to be a tank hybrid AP, which is why none of his skills scale off of armor or AD like Malphite or Rammus, for example, but they seem to be conflicted as to which role they wanted him to go more towards. His base stats at max rank don't make him a formidable tank, and quite frankly, he feels squishy even with his heal passive going off. On the flip side, his AP ratios make the extra damage just feel like an afterthought, something a couple more auto techs could provide. If you add up all the tanky AP items, that's, you know, the Rod of Ages, the Crystal Scepter, and Abyssal Scepter, that's only about 210 AP. And if you break it down between the skills, you're adding about an effective 70 damage per skill, which 70 damage is like an auto attack, and after magic resistance even less. So it really can't, I really don't see the benefit of going AP hybrid when you could actually survive longer and be more of a disturbance to a team if you just went straight tank. So in the end, this results in a decent early game, but no real solid late game. Rather, no real solid role late game. And a person could argue that he is merely a disruptor, aimed to be a nuisance in late game team fights, but that's not enough. You know, if you look at how League of Legends is structured, late game, everybody has to do more than what their specific role is. If somebody just builds complete tank but has no damage, people are just going to learn to ignore that person, and essentially you're going to be the only one left at the end of the team fight, and you're completely worthless because you can't kill anybody. So Riot and League of Legends really has made it a goal to give people, especially tanks, some type of at least consistent damage or bursty damage just to kind of make up for that, because overall his ratios are so low that if you encounter anybody, even as AP hybrid 1v1, you're not going to be able to take him. So it's for this reason I went full tank and only took caster runes to compensate for his early game, mana requirements, magic pin, and cooldown. Now, as for items, an early Banshee's Veil seems to be like the best item on him, similar to Nunu. So I took a mana crystal and 2 HP pots most of the time. I really tried to lane myself with another AD person. 2 tanks in the lane didn't really work if you're playing as the off tank. And it really just benefited most from somebody who had another consistent slow or stun. On my first trip back, I would try to get a Callus and boots on as fast as I could, because he is very, very slow. He is so slow without boots. It's incredible. This is why I usually took Ghost and Exhaust as my summoner spells, just so I could be up in people's faces that much more. You know, I could catch up to them because I could exhaust them or Ghost to catch up. Otherwise, it's slow. And now after Banshees, I usually went Sunfire Cape and then built a Frozen Heart. I really felt like the HP was better. HP and armor was better on him earlier on than the cooldown reduction. I mean, he really benefits most from the cooldown reduction late game, I think. Just because early game, the damage is okay that the cooldowns could be longer. After this point, it was usually situational, but generally I built another HP item. I really got anything AP, like I said earlier, just because the damage is just negligible. Even if you got 350 AP on him, his Q and his E would only do about 105 more damage per spell. And when people have 3k HP and at max level, that's pretty much a drop in the bucket. And like I said, surviving longer, providing more stuns and slows, better overall use for the team. Now, if you're laning against a Maokai, the best thing you can do here is to simply just stay near your creeps. If you can evade the initial impact of his E, then the actual sapling will go for the creeps, not you if you move away. So he'll target them, and then you'll be fine. So hug your creeps, you'll be okay. Otherwise, in team fights, just do not focus him. He is not going to be in the main fight, and just try to avoid that circle as much as possible and try to fight them outside of that, or just simply disengage and wait for him to turn it off, because as soon as he turns it off, you guys can go right back in there and he won't have it for 20-30 seconds, and it just makes him a stun bot, and that's about it. If you're playing as Maokai, I really just feel like you need to build tank for right now and just hold on, until they actually buff your ratios to try anything else, really. Your best bet is to early on feed your carries by way of stuns and slows in the lanes and in team fights. That way, late game, your role can just serve as a stunner and a slower with that damage reduction as best as possible, and you don't have to worry about providing that damage for your carries, in addition to your carries, rather. So I feel Maokai in the end has a lot of potential. He's really fun, and his skills make for a very enjoyable experience with a well-organized team. With an unorganized team, it's not the case at all. He simply suffers from bad ratios and is simply awkward to use ultimate against anybody that's competent. He may be good in some circumstances, but in general, the question begs to ask, why would you take him over any other already available tanks and hybrids in his current state? There's no tank I can conceivably think that I would take Maokai instead of, unless I need somebody with an AoE, and that would be like Shen, and opposed to Shen, rather. For now, I would just say save your IP and wait till the next patch. He'll undoubtedly get some buffs and tweaks in the next patch. I can kind of see that they may buff his initial base damage at higher ranks for some of his spells, just so that if you go tank, it's sexier to go as just straight tank. And they'll probably buff some of his AP ratios as well, because honestly, I think they should bring him more in line with Nunu. Not as good as ratios as Nunu, but the damage should be at least somewhat comparable, just so that he feels like more of a threat if you go hybrid. Because otherwise, right now, if he goes hybrid, he's really squishy. He can die really quick. If he goes full tank, he's just a nuisance in team fights. Anyways, guys, let me know what you thought in the comments. Let me know if you've been having luck with him and what you've been finding to be the case as far as your play style with him. If you guys have any questions or comments, as long as they're well-mannered, I'll be sure to look at them and possibly respond to them. I hope you guys have a good night, and this is Spunkify out. I'll see you later.
Remember, only you can prevent forest fires.